good afternoon again, everyone, for those who just joining this webinar. So my name is Aaron. So I'll be sharing with you on the topics of this afternoon about architecting software with object-oriented analysis and design. So actually, this is one of the course offering that we conduct. It is a 3 days based workshop. Yeah, so they got about 11 practical case study to go through. So I would presume that most of you here are already somehow have a background in the programming, in the software development, right? Maybe you have done object-oriented programming like C++, Java, and also .NET. These are the three most popular programming language that are leveraging on the power of object orientation. Okay, so about this so-called architecting software with object-oriented analysis and design. So in the short form, it is called ASOT. Basically, it's about the technique how to architect a software using a proper object-oriented analysis and design. Of course, based on the UML version. And of course, providing the fundamental of object-oriented thinking that I think I'm going to share shortly. Right. So the other interesting part is that it has provided 11 practical workshop that is integrated and connected. So what do I mean by this? I think I need to qualify this the last sentence on the end-to-end of single case study. I believe you have gone through, some of us gone through object-oriented training or object-oriented subject or course during our school days. Yeah, and interestingly is that I have gone through quite a number of the textbooks. Yeah, I'm talking about the textbook teaching about object orientation. And I haven't found any textbook that provided end-to-end single case study. So meaning when they do a class diagram, they said they are using ATM system, right? Automatic teller machine. Then when they go to the sequence diagram, they are using library system. Okay, when they go to the activity diagram, they do a so-called timing diagram. They are using a car park management system. So if you have multiple scenario, how are you going to apply in the real world? Yeah, and of course, talking about object orientation is that most of us assume I've taken the subject, I got A in my subject, and I know what to do. Okay, but as a matter of fact, in the last, I think, almost 30 years, my involvement in the object-oriented world, I have also interviewed quite a number of so-called established, right? The word double quote established Java developer or .NET developer, Java architect, .NET architect. And I start discussing with them about, how do you apply the design pattern and etc. So most of them can't really answer, or they can't answer what I'm looking for, right? Like the word anthropomorphism. I don't know how many of you here in this audience heard the word anthropomorphism. If you are applying object orientation, right? You have studied the object orientation. You need to apply the anthropomorphism in solving a problem. Okay, I'm talking about the English word called anthropomorphism, right? Now later I have a slide to explain it. Okay, so in many cases is that when I conduct interview in the past, hiring a so-called a developer or software architect, I ask a few keywords in the object orientation, and most of them can't answer me. So I said, wow, I thought you already done software development using object orientation the last 10 years, but you can't answer my question. So there's something disconnect here. Okay. And of course, another interesting part is that I have also, in the past, when I used to teach this training, we have quite a number of the university lecturer, okay, that has been teaching or delivering object-oriented subject in their faculty, okay. And interestingly is that, of course, I asked them, why do you attend such a training? Or because they said that they wanted to know what industry practice about object orientation. I've been teaching this course in the last 10 years. Okay, then of course that was in the beginning of the training. Okay, and surprisingly, towards the second day, the third day, they told me, why you don't start from the class diagram? I said, hang on, why should we start from the class diagram, right? Because he said, in my teaching, I've been teaching my student start from the class diagram, identifying the object. I said, no, that's not the right way. The right way is that you should start from the use cases. But they said, yeah, use cases we only cover briefly. That is the reason why we can't apply object-oriented properly. That is the reason why there are many issues today that we cannot solve, right? And of course, I told them that you don't feel guilty, right? Because I think the books, the textbook out there are so teaching us that way, right? But I'm coming from the practical world, right? I'm involved in the last software development, and I know what it takes to get it right, to build a right software. Right. Of course, now we are talking about all the agile, etc. That one is a style of the programming, but in terms of the context, it's still the same. We still need to have some sort of object-oriented thinking and concept properly. Yeah. So this course, this basically webinar exactly will be sharing about all these so-called critical thinking. And this is typically, if you go through the proper training, this is what you will go through on the day one. Okay, so I'll be covering some on the day one in the next half an hour. Okay, so basically to understand what's object orientation, and then some of the concept, and of course, in terms of the modeling technique, start with the number one. Use case is the right start. Okay, and many of the, as I mentioned, that after I discover many of those practitioners out there, that they still think like it doesn't work, right? Because they don't start from the use case. They start, most of them are from the class diagram. Actually, if you start right, the subsequent modeling technique goes smoothly, because everything what we do in the object orientation using UML, it will refer back to the use case. Regardless of you want to do class diagram, sequence diagram, timing diagrams, collaboration diagram, all are referring back to the use case. So basically, if you don't get it right, everything wrong, and you don't get the full benefit of applying the right technique. Then after that, once we got the use case, then we can start moving on to do activity diagram, right? So the objective of the activity diagram actually pretty similar with the BPMN, with the business process modeling, right? Except the activity diagram, I think, is much simpler than the BPMN. Yeah, but of course this one is interchangeable, and actually the source is again back from the use case. Then after that, of course, got the CRC. The objective of the CRC actually to understand which are the object so-called critical. How do we identify the object so that we can have a class diagram? Okay, so this technique also they are quite often being omitted, right? So that's why they don't get the right object. That's why the class diagram at the end don't work. And at the end, what happened? As a human, typically if you got extra budget, you buy the tools, the object-oriented tool that can do reverse engineering. So basically, you would rather write the code faster. So you write a code in the Java or .NET, build a class diagram, define all the attributes. Then after that, you load it into the tools, and the tools generate the class diagram. Okay, but interestingly, in all the tool, there isn't any tool can generate the use case, because the use case is where you get you applying the architecture, the art of the defining the requirement, defining the precondition, business rule, and etc. So most of the tool out there can't generate the use case, so they can only generate a sequence diagram or the class diagram. Okay, so this is not right, the practice in the current industry, that what I have observed in the last 20-30 years. Yeah. Then of course, once you understand all the class diagram, then you look at the robustness. Robustness, basically, you want to know the flow, how the object interacting, right? So you need to know all the messages being sent and etc. Because we want to make sure that we comprehend the component that we're going to build into the source code. Then in the day 3, right, if you ever attended our training, then you understand about object interaction. So you understand about the communication diagram, about what are the information flow, sequence diagram, right? About the activation, about the lifeline on the particular object, right? If you understand about object oriented, so everyone that you need to instantiate, right? You create a new something, and of course, like Java.NET got automatic garbage collector. So this defined in the sequence diagram. And of course, like if you're using traditional programming language like C++, you need to release the memory, right? So all defined in the sequence diagram. Then after that, you can go into the modeling technique number 7 about structural, about the state diagram, right? Because every object got a different state at any particular in time, so we understand that. Then, of course, there are some pitfalls that I'm going also to share in this webinar, right? Not every system or every problem can be resolved with object orientation, so we need to know that. Okay, and of course, this is one of the few in the world that the course come with the certification. Okay, so there will be the open book exam at the end of the training. Yeah, so that's basically to give you an overview, and of course, I'm going to share about 1 hour from now, right? So I will give you so-called a teaser and what are so-called important the topics, the concept that I want you to know. Okay, because these are very important for software development to be successful, to be maintainable, achieving all the quality attributes. So just now I've gone through the agenda, right? Day 1 to day 3. That is, I think, quite structured. What if now I don't have object oriented? This is what you will get. You will see this. Can someone interpret this? What do you learn in the day 1, day 2, and day 3? What are the topics? That's what happened in most of the cases when you open up other people's source code, or maybe our source code. Who can maintain this? Tell me. Even me, who wrote the code 6 months ago, I still don't understand why I wrote this type of code. I didn't know, but I said, Aaron, it's you the one who checked into the repository. Yeah, but I said I didn't know that I wrote like this. How am I going to maintain? If I'm the one who wrote the code, cannot maintain, cannot explain, do you think somebody else can maintain? And you know how much would the cost to fix this? This is like, I would rather think, boss, can you give me 1 month? Let me start from scratch. Let me rewrite from scratch. I think faster than fixing this. This is totally unreadable, non-maintainable, right? But this is the reality of life, isn't it? If you open up the source code, this is what you will see. Unreadable. And it's like, wow, it's jumbled up everything, right? So we need to fix this. That's why we need to have a proper design thinking, right? In designing all the component and etc. So actually, this topic is related with of course, the specialization in the software architecture and solution architecture. Okay, so I think I have run, more than 10 over webinar. Yeah, you can go into the YouTube of our channel. Then you can see all the webinar that I've delivered in the last, 3 to 4 months, right? I've never delivered webinar as much as in the last 3-4 months in my entire life because of the COVID-19. Okay, so push everything to go digital, right? Normally, I used to speak in the conference almost like 2 or 3 times a week in the 5 countries, right? So now I have to do it, on my desk, and I need to share. And also, it's still the same impact. So I think some of you are from a few countries that within the Asia country. So what happened is this. These are so-called the recommended training path, right? For some of you who are our alumni, right? I think you have gone through some of our training. So these are the path to. I'm focusing on the software and solution to become software and solution architect. And you can see at the right bottom there. So architecting software with object-oriented analysis and design and UML are one of the recommended, right? Because we want to make sure that when you deliver a solution, you can also understand the complexity and also not only thinking about the solution is up and running, but you also need to think about the changes, right? Because what happened is that business and even technology, the industry are changing. So how responsive is our software, our component? Why is my team replied to me that it took them 3 months to fix a simple request, whereby in my logic, it could be done in a few hours, okay? Because nobody doing a proper so-called thinking on the component design using object orientation. That's why ignoring this, you will not die, but you will suffer in terms of giving back a fast response to the business. You will suffer in terms of your agility and fast response. Which is, I think today in the digital era, we expect everything need to be a fast and quick turnaround. So the concept in terms of where object-oriented analysis and design in terms of the TOGAF, because we are still thinking that enterprise architecture have a strong value proposition in the today context, right? So I think this is TOGAF for those of you who have gone through the TOGAF. So let me just give you a brief overview, right? So TOGAF is about the transition, about the life journey, right? It's the enterprise architecture, digital transformation is not a project, it's the life journey. That's why if you see the so-called symbol, is like the wheels, right? From the A to B to C to D to E to F to G to H, and it's rotating, right? It's moving. It's alive, moving wheels. Same thing with our enterprise today. So what happened is that in the typical preliminary stage is that we need to ensure that we are preparing an organization for transformation. That's called preliminary. And we need to get the strong support from the senior management. Then after that, we develop the architecture, right? So we understand the vision, the strategy of the organization. Then after that, we identify the gap, what the gap bring the impact to the business landscape, to the data or application software landscape, and also technology landscape. Okay, so of course this one is at the architecture level, and the architecture level it will connect back into the so-called physical. The physical we call it solution architecture, which is where the UML and object orientation are so-called dwelling there. Whereby the architecture building block typically you're going to use Archimate, right? The Archimate language, the notation. It has a link back into the solutioning part, which is either using UML or BPMN. Okay, so typically after you understand all the gap, you consolidate that, and then you turn it become a project. Then after that, in the G is where you are applying your solutioning. This is where you're applying so-called design pattern, right? Or the design thinking in there, and also using object orientation. And H if there is any changes. Yeah, so this is basically about enterprise architecture lifecycle in a nutshell. And of course, talking about the Archimate, right? For those of you who have practiced the Archimate, I think you can find a similarity between the UML and BPMN. Actually, UML and BPMN, the high-level design thinking has been extracted and they package it into the Archimate. Okay, so Archimate basically connecting the enterprise and how to model the enterprise for transformation. Then after that, of course, from the Archimate itself, it can link back into the UML or BPMN. Yeah, so this is basically the context about the thinking and the solutioning in terms of the end-to-end architecture. So challenges faced by IT, why do we need object orientation? I'm talking about now the operational, yeah? I'm talking about the tactical operational on the ground, because the strategic part is handled by the enterprise architecture. Okay, so these are typically the user perspective in terms of the challenges faced by IT, right? What system? I haven't seen a new system, because the system is like you already run the patches. I just need to load from URL and I got the system, right? I cannot feel. I don't know how many kilo, how big is the system. I cannot tell, right? Because last time I can see the server is big. I can hear the fan. Now it's everything virtual in the cloud. So I cannot see. Of course, sometimes we think like, oh, it might work, but it's very difficult to use. I don't like the way the new system, the usability. And of course, we can put all the fancy thing, right? We can put all the graphic, the animation, but does it do anything useful that help my concern, help my situation, help my work? Okay, this pretty much what the user perspective is. Then from the client, if we provide to the business client or user, right? If I know the real price, I have never agreed to have this software, okay? Because like any changes cost few $100,000. Whereby actually supposed to expect should be fast. Why every changes cost few $100,000? Yeah, so this is something that are real today. And of course, sometimes like it's no use delivering it now. I need the system 2 years ago, so you deliver now is too late already, right? The project get delayed and etc. So this is the reality of life. And of course, the client will say to us that I didn't want it in the first place, but you insisted. Okay, you play politics with my boss. Ask me now to involve in this project. Actually, I don't need this, right? Of course, from the IT perspective, we tell the business people, we tell the client, we tell the user, it was impossible, but no one listened, right? They tell us, just do it, Aaron. Just do it. Don't ask too many questions. And of course, the reality is this. The system is fine, but the problem is the people. Okay, the user are the real problem. Our system is up and running. We can hear we can ping the network reply and nothing wrong. It's alive. But why the system, the user give us many problems? So these are the typical scenario that when there's an issue, the business blame the IT people also blame the business people. So this one will never end story one. And of course, this is the reality, right? Don't blame me. I have never done object oriented. So you can see just now the agenda on my initial slide. That's supposed to be nicely organized, but I jumble up everything, right? And I hope you can read and understand, comprehend of what I have written. But that's not the reality in life. Yeah. And of course, if this continue, what is the future? That's why the software development cost is so high. Even until today, it's nothing cheap, right? And you know, it's quite irony. Even until today, recently I also faced another vendor that giving many excuses. I said, how should I respond to you? If you attended my class, you will not talk to me like this, right? The problem is that you don't understand what I'm talking about, and you practice it wrongly, and then you ask me to pay for it, right? So it's like you do a mistake, and I need to pay for your school fee, right? So, but this is the reality of life, until we realize that things need to get it done properly. I need to be well informed, I need to be educated, then I can build a proper system or software. So what is object orientation, right? So I think in the simplistic way, this is what happened is that conventional system. So conventional system is like fetching or storing. So it's one-to-one, okay, not a big issue. Of course, the issue on the conventional system is that maintenance is very expensive and also take a lot of lead time. Yeah? So now, of course, business want everything to be fast, to be lean, to be responsive, and they call it agile, right? That's why now many of the so-called software development, they said they would rather go for the Scrum Agile framework. That one is the style, it's okay, right? But when you write the code, you still need to have a proper fundamental like object orientation. Okay, so these are something that we cannot run away, right? Unless you say that, my platform is very unique, I don't need to do anything, I just do I click here, go to configuration, fine. But behind the scenes, someone need to build it properly. Yeah. Of course, this is something that a very important word in object orientation. In fact, in today, when you build a system, okay, if you claim yourself as an IT professional, this is the word that you need to know. Anthropomorphism. What is that? You just now I mentioned to you in the beginning, right? So typically when I go for interviewing someone, when I want to expand the team, they say, oh, they have done a lot in the .NET, Java, and they know object oriented, they know design pattern. I just ask one word, anthropomorphism. Most of them ask me, how do you spell that word? So when you ask me, how do you spell that word, they mean something not right. Okay. After that, I spell out for them, anthropomorphism. Please explain to me, how do you apply this in your day-to-day job as a programmer or as a software architect, etc. Tell me. I give you 5 minutes, right? So most of them can't really explain to me what is this, right? They thought it's some sort of the medicine, okay? But this is actually a very important terminology. Basically, it's the ability to treat something or everything, in fact, as they were alive, responsive, intelligent, and have a boundary. That's what they call it object. So object-oriented, like OOAD, actually coming from this concept of anthropomorphism. Yeah, I will give you an example. Like a person. Okay, if we come out a tangible object, a person, can I name the person? Yes, I can. Right? I can name it. Name Aaron. How old? Right? 50 years old. Okay, is male or female? Right? I can ask. Same thing with aircraft. So I can ask the aircraft, what aircraft are you? Oh, I'm a Boeing. Right? What series? I'm Boeing 737. Okay, how many passengers you have? And where are you now? I can ask. That's called anthropomorphism. So you need to have this concept correctly applied. Yeah. The same thing with the role. So what's your role, employee? So who are your employer? I can ask. They can tell me, right? And then the car owner, right? Same thing. What car do you have? When did you buy the car? They can ask me. They can tell me. Organization, same thing. Your company, right? ATD, where are your officers? They can tell me. How many departments you have? They can tell me. Right? Same thing, the concept like the date. I can also ask what date. Is it today public holiday? They can tell me. Like a mouse click. Okay. Is it right click? Is it left click? Is it double click? Okay. Location. Same thing. They can respond to me. And computer features. Right? All these are very important concept that need to be so-called properly what I would say you need to think through and solving the real problem in this concept, anthropomorphism. Okay, so of course this example on the aircraft, right? Anthropomorphism. I can ask, I can query, right? I can assign the value, right? Same thing with the book. The book, I can know what is your ISBN number. Okay, it's called anthropomorphism. Same thing with the human, right? I can assign that. So the way that the object-oriented work is that all the object work together. Okay, so work together and they have their defined boundary. So that means if like this, talking about the aircraft, you are flying from one destination to another destination. So from your house to the next destination. Okay, you can get the map, you know the aeroplane, and you know the date, and you know who are the crew in the aeroplane, who are the pilot, what are the radar, and etc. Okay, that's the concept of object orientation. This is a very basic fundamental. And of course, the way they work is that they're typically passing around, right? That doesn't mean that I know everything. So actually, the orientation is giving so-called the opportunity for someone to be so-called specialized and also collaborating, right? Instead of you do everything by yourself. If in the typical so-called procedural method, right? You do everything from A to Z. Maybe one method is about 1,000 lines, whereby in object-oriented, you only need 15 lines of code, and the rest you need to pass around to another object to complete the job. Okay, so basically the concept is, incorporating quite number of the architecture thinking, right? So you are translating from the information architecture, infrastructure, software, as well as business architecture. So these are some of the so-called programming languages that are so-called supporting object orientation. Yeah, like even like Java, .NET, Eiffel, Smalltalk, C++. No, so all these are some of the code that I'm very fortunate. I think I've experienced in the 4 or 5 of these programming languages before during my tenure, the last 30 years. Yeah, because I used to be a so-called a hardcore programmer. I also wrote last time the tools about object-oriented tools, to understand the Java virtual machine and etc. and as well as .NET. So what are the benefits of object-oriented analysis and design? Right, this is what we want to achieve. We want to deliver on time, on budget, right, without major bugs or defects. Right, we want to have the system have business value, meaning is that not only we build fast, because object orientation also encourage of reusability, right? Then after that, of course, if there's any changes, we can respond fast because we have a proper so-called component or design. Yeah, and of course to support traceability, because traceability is very important. How if there's any issue that we need to track from from a requirement to the code to the runtime and etc. How do we trace that? Yeah, so the concept again, like the why do we need enterprise architecture? Because we want to know any impact in the entire enterprise. Now for the object oriented is that in the impact within the programming module. Okay, we need to know that it's the smaller scale of the enterprise architecture, but within the component within the system, we need to track and trace the impact analysis and dependency. Okay, so this is also another. Once you understand anthropomorphism, right? You understand that your line of code per method for polymorphism, anthropomorphism, and coding shouldn't exceed more than 15 lines of code. Talking about 15 lines of code is quite interesting, I think like 28 years ago, yeah, 28 years ago, at the time I was using a programming language called Pascal. Okay, I don't know, some of you are the same age with me. I think Pascal was very, and also Fox Pro are very popular. Okay, and I remember at the time I was very upset, because my colleague able to write about, I think, 12,000 lines of code in a single method. So in my mind, wow, this guy must be super intelligent, super duper developer. How on earth he can write 12,000 lines of code? And then if I look at my code, the longest is about 9,000. How can I add 3,000 more lines to beat him? That's what at the time in my thinking. Okay, and of course, it's like at the time, like if you can write that line of code, there are people worship you. Say, wow, you must be God. You're super good. Your logic is amazing, right? How about today? Today, If someone tell you, Aaron, you write 50 lines of code, come, let me show you. I wrote 2 lines of code, doing exactly the same like what you do. So today, after 28 years, people change, right? Now it's like, what? You can do it in 2 lines of code? How you do that? It take me about 13 lines of code or 15 lines of code, right? So that's why the object-oriented is like, you need to delegate. That's why you need to have applying the interfaces, right? That's why you got all the inheritance, you got all type of encapsulation, right? So that you can delegate the task. If you still write the code like few hundred lines of code, that means I can see what type of character you are. You are the character that you want to get everything for yourself. You don't want to share with anybody. Whereby the object-oriented concept is that it encourages you to share and delegate the task. You don't wall up everything yourself. Yeah. And of course, to make a system more testable, reusable, able to cope with the large system, more robust, and of course, elegant. That's very nice, right? I would just say, oh, take a look, my code. Very clean, neat, and tidy, and sweet and short. Everybody read this at the at a glance, they know what is the code about. Okay, that's the objective. Yeah, so not a long-winded long code that is non-maintainable. Of course, in terms of the notation, I think we are using UML. So UML, I think it has been proven there already over 30 years, I think. Yeah, 20 over years. And of course, this is something, I think the three amigos, right? The Boots, the Jim Ramba, and the Ivor Jacobson. Okay, so on the right hand side, it's nothing to do with the three amigos. Of course, they got the Grady Boots there. So I was lucky enough to meet him in person, and of course, John Jackman there and the Grady. That's the two guru together. I'm on the left hand side. It just happened to be there, and I took the pictures with him. Okay. Then, of course, about UML, they are actually type of the diagram. They got 14 of them, right? So 3 are behavioral, 4 actually is a management, model management, and 7 is a structural. Okay, so we need to understand when to use what, okay, or where to use what, right? So these are so-called are critical today. You need to apply it correctly. Okay, let me just give you a couple of examples, right? Because these course actually are 3 days. Yeah, so now it's like give you some of the flavor. Yeah, so let me just share with you about use case. And I think for some of you who want to get more in depth on the webinar, I think I have another webinar called Business IT Architecture Fundamental, the BITAF. So the one I'm covering a lot on the use case concept. So here we just use a couple of slides. Yeah. So basically about fact finding, they got many techniques. Basically, what at the end of the day is that we need to make sure that we capture the right requirement and complaint. That's it. The rest are not relevant, right? So of course the requirement itself must be coming from the right source. Don't get requirement from the wrong source, then you never get it right. We never get it right. Okay. So basically, of course, they got the concept of the use case. I think you see the diagram. Okay. So use case approach actually is the first thing first when you want to do object orientation. You don't skip this. Okay. When of course, as I mentioned, unfortunately, I've seen many of the object oriented. They don't have the use case. They only have a class diagram and sequence diagram. So I said, if you don't have a use case, how do you know is your object-oriented correct? Nobody knows, right? It just gut feel. I think I need just build a class diagram, and my class diagram got the attribute, got the method, and then I put it in the sequence diagram. I think this object call that object, right? It doesn't work that way. You need to get the use case right. Okay, so this is the fact of the use case. It's the most critical part among 14 UML diagram and must be done correctly in every IT project as a start. Okay, so meaning if you don't get a use case correctly, you still can have some sort of system, but somehow it be a broken link, right? Your design, your component are not fully integrated, so you need to have a proper so-called use case defined first. In fact, it's the most important diagram among the 14 UML. Okay. And of course, this is where you need to get all the requirement from both business and IT to have the common understanding, right? Of course, used by the project management to do resource allocation, project planning, as well as the time estimation. Of course, can complement and define the right prototype, right? And of course, both user and IT need to be agree, and of course, can also be used by tester and to create many use cases or acceptance tests or test cases. So it's very, very powerful method that, you know, but I seldom see this in action in many of the even the large software houses. So typical use case identification process basically is that between us and so-called our key stakeholders or key user. Basically, we are trying to capture what the whole requirement all about, what we are trying to build, okay, at the operational level. Then these are the example on the diagram, right? So the diagram, the use case also got a proper technique, right? So yeah, I think if you want to refer more on this, you can refer to the other webinar that I explain how to use this. Yeah. And of course, key objective of the use case documentation template is that we want to make sure that when we template testing, we know that if there's anything missing, we will know straight away. Okay, and also we want to get a so-called design by contract. So we want to get the correctness and also accepted by the user. So these are the example on the typical use case, like you know, assign staff to work on a campaign. So this one actually is taken from our real course. Yeah, so you got the case study, got 11 of them. So this is just one of the example that on the basic flow. Okay, so basic flow is something that need to be done first. It happened in the under circumstances of the assumption of the perfect world. Perfect world means this so-called function or system or the module or the flow that should work under a normal circumstances. And of course, in the real world, thing can go wrong, right? That's why we introduce exception, variation, extension, and business rule, and etc. Okay. So there are steps in the use cases. So firstly, we need to identify the actors and the use cases itself, and then draw the diagram, and then start documenting it. Okay, and with all the sections that are required to be filled. Okay, so for instance, like assign staff to work on a campaign, we can have a precondition. Okay, the campaign, there's a campaign required staff to work on. So that means someone has created the campaign, for instance, precondition. And then the post condition, of course, the staff is assigned to the campaign, right? So the basic flow, again, there will be a use case start when a campaign manager need to assign staff, and then manager select the client, and you know, a list of staff not working that are available will be displayed, and then campaign manager select and assign. Okay, so these are the so-called basic flow. Then variation, if there isn't, then there isn't. But exception, like at step number 3, when all the staff are assigned to the campaign already, then the system informed that there is no staff available. And also they got extension because they need to find the campaign use case. So this is also another concept on the object orientation. So they delegate and they ask another object. Okay, because eventually all the use cases can be turned into one or more objects or one or more class diagram when you do the so-called the design of the class diagram. Yeah. So activity diagram, right? So activity diagram actually is about you know, how we can understand the activities, the flow, the workflow, you know, how the system should function, and also to validate the flow of complex use case. So if you got many exception, variation, and etc., so you can validate it using activity diagram. So of course, activity diagram is today in our normal term, we call it SOP. And typically, you can also define this using BPMN or like EPC, right? Then you can run a simulation too. So this is an example on the activity diagram, right? With the swim lane. So it's like someone withdraw money. So they got the customer, it could be you and me. They got the ATM machine and they got the bank, right? The bank could be the physical bank itself. So how the flow and the responsibility of, you know, you can see here about how you insert the card, and then, you know, how you go into the authorization to make sure that you have a correct registered account, right? Then enter the PIN number, check the account balance, and after that you withdraw money. So they got the forking input and the decision. Yeah. So all these are quite critical, and this of course is not a static modeling. Typically, you need to have a repository that connect together from Archimate to the activity diagram, to the UML and BPMN, so that you can do round trip impact analysis and the dependency. Okay, so typically the step, there will be a step 1 to 5, right? So identify the use case and then model the use case. When we do the activity diagram, right? You take a look. Step 1, 2, and 3 are referring to the use case. So if you don't have the use case, how you define the activity diagram? How in fact you define your BPMN, business process modeling, right? Everything is starting from the use case, because I'm a believer on the so-called logical thinking, right? And also the right process, because we want to replicate, or we want to scale up the work. If you don't have a proper way, right? Maybe out of the 20 time, maybe we only get it 2 right, the 18 wrong, and we can't afford to do that. We want to get 20 of them right. So that's why we need to have a proper method to do so-called information capturing and also model or design. Yeah. Of course, if you want to skip all this, you can straight away write the code. Okay, no issue, right? And then whoever maintain it, you don't care already, right? You move on to the next project, right? But the reality is that today people need to also care or worry about tomorrow, because things will change and we need to change it fast. And where can we reference what to change and etc. That's why we need to have this type of method. Okay, so step 1, we identify the use case. So we got the so-called use case diagram. Then after that, we map the basic flow. So the basic flow map into the activity diagram, right? It's nothing wrong. Then after that, we apply the complete use case. So they got exception, they got variation, and etc. Okay, so become like this. Then of course, we can apply a swim lane to make it nice between the teacher and system. Okay, so that is more readable, and we know that these are the teacher responsibility, and that one will be a system responsibility. Okay, so we are at the just now step 3. Then after that, we apply a swim lane. So we have a so-called a proper response. So we understand where the teacher and the system is. Yeah, so basically about the flow of the partition. So the next one is about the topic on the class diagram. Okay, so basically a class diagram has 3 kind of relationship: association. Association meaning the relationship between 2 classes. Okay, so typically they have a cardinality, like 1 to many or 1 to 1. Okay, the next one is aggregation. So aggregation basically could be an exclusive relationship, a collection of relationship. So typically is denoted by the black diamond or the white diamond. So generalization actually is about inheritance, right? So basically you're trying to generalize particular object, and then there will be a parent and the children. Yeah. So these are the example on the class diagram. So association is where they have a cardinality between 1 or too many. Then there will be so-called composition. There will be also the aggregation, and also the so-called generalization. Generalization actually is about inheritance. Okay. So this is basically the concept on the class diagram. The next one is about sequence diagram. So sequence diagram is where we are trying to understand, to comprehend how one object pass the message to another object, and they got the lifeline. They call it activation bar. Okay. So in the context of object oriented, this is where so-called the instance still alive. Okay. So by the end of the method, then the garbage collector will pick up the so-called the unused object. Yeah. So these are the example on the typical sequence diagram on the phone conversation, yeah, between the dialer, the phone, and the recipient. So the dialer could be me. I'm pick up my handset and I hear the dial tone and I enter the numbers, and then the recipient, it will get the ringtone, and then the answer, and after that we start the conversation. So these are the so-called sequence diagram that are very important in terms of understanding the messages. And just to note that typically this type of sequence diagram should be logical, because I've ever involved in the one project, right? Quite the last project, and the vendor trying to be, they thought that I don't know anything. Okay, so they get the tools, they reverse engineering their source code, and then they show it to me, the class diagram, and I said, wow, how am I going to read this, right? The messages got 1,000 of them, and they put it in the A3. I said, this is not usable and not readable. I said, if you want to design something, and if you design something like this and you present it to me and ask me to understand, and I can't understand it, it's just wasting of time, isn't it? Might as well you don't do it. So I tell them, you need to rewrite. Give me the logical one, right? I don't need to know the data part, because the data part, that means you are trying to cheat. You are doing reverse engineering. You write the code and then you dump it into the so-called sequence diagram like this. So you can't do that. We need to have a forward engineering. I said, I want to see the logical path. I don't need to know the actual one. The actual one is, you can write 1,000 lines of code, right? But it doesn't mean anything for me to analyze about the sequence diagram. Okay, so this is another example on the adding a new advert, right? So basically the go-to message, these are all logical, right? Logical means something that making sense, because what happened that we want to know whether anything missing here. But of course, in the actual part, in the actual source code itself, could be the message could be 20 times or 30 times more than this, right? But that's okay. That's in the programming side. But we shouldn't be so-called doing reverse engineering. Because what happened is that this was one of our client outsourced the development work to the vendor, and of course I told them that I need to see all the UML design applied correctly. Okay, so some they think logical, and most of the time they're giving me the reverse engineering one. When I look at the glance, I know already. I said, you can't give this to me. This is totally not acceptable at all, because it's no use, right? It's so complex like this. It is no point for me to understand all this complexity that your source code you're giving back to me in the sequence diagram. But this is the reality of life. Okay, people try to shortcut in the real life, but you want to do proper work, you do it properly, not doing reverse engineering way. Okay, and of course there are some issues and challenges faced in the object-oriented environment, right? It's not all the you can't apply everything object orientation, just put it that way. Okay, so there are two types of applications that are not suitable for object oriented. So first is more on the database oriented. So you do a lot of SQL procedure, you do a trigger, just do it in the database query level. You don't need to use object orientation, but you can if you want to, but not mandatory. Or application that are strongly algorithmic, right? So you got many calculation, formula, etc. So that one you can just use a direct approach. Yeah, it's okay. We also need to access a legacy system, right? Of course, not talking about interfaces, object wrapper, remote object, and etc. So all this also, we can use some sort of object orientation to assess the legacy information. And of course, this is something about the cost of ignoring software quality, right? If you don't find the bugs during the unit testing or integration testing, you found the bugs during the live production, live system, the cost of fixing it, the cost that someone need to bear are exponential. Okay, and in fact, if you find the bugs at the live system, it's not only cost you money, but it may cost people life. Okay, and you don't want that to happen. So basically, we need to understand this properly. And of course, the OAD and the Agile are hand in hand, right? So basically, you want to be fast, you want to have a rapid deployment, a shorter iteration. You need also have a proper pattern, right? So like Agile, Scrum, etc. is one of the style in executing the project, but the fundamental of the code itself is still need to be properly defined in the object-oriented way. So this actually is, about the so-called, they got many diagram, right? I think I want to quote from the Martin Fowler. Okay, Martin Fowler is one of the guru, right, in terms of the software development, object-oriented, and software engineering, etc. Right? They got many diagram. It is like a buffet. You don't want to eat them all. Take only what you need. Is that true? I'm not so sure. Nowadays, I seldom go to buffet already because I can't eat. But during younger day, you go to buffet, you wallop everything, right? That's why some of the buffet restaurant, they only give you like maximum 1.5 hours or 1 hour, and you have to leave, because otherwise you wallop the whole thing, and actually you don't feel good, isn't it? I don't know. Do you feel good when you offer full? You don't. So the same thing, like all the knowledge in terms of the UML, the diagram, etc. You only use what you need. Okay, just enough lah. That's the concept. Okay, so with that, I think I will end my sharing on the object orientation.